The only reason why Sabrina uses credit card is
To collect.
not for the credit. It's to collect miles and points.
What can I do with the credit? Oh, but because I don't need credit now.
Because you are so
I'm not
rich?
taking any loans. I have no big purchases to buy.
But credit is a good thing, right? It allows
I
you
mean,
better-
I'm building credit.
I mean, if the credit is free, why not?
When I
right?
remember to pay my credit card bills, I'm building credit. When I forget that.
Have you ever paid anything to a credit card company? Like, no, aside from the money that you borrowed, any like, I don't know, fines?
Yeah.
For what?
Because I forgot to pay my credit card bill. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 99 of the Impulse podcast. So on the previous episode, we dived a little deeper into Shopee Express and its logistic arms because Sea Group recently released their Q3 results for the year. And in this episode, we're going to dive a little deeper into their financial services arm, right? So SEAMoney.
So Felix, can you pull out that slide? As you can see, that digital financial services is a very profitable part of C Group. And if you look at Q3, this year, it actually made 187.9, so almost 200 million US dollars of just EBITDA, which is basically profit. It's a business that people sort of vaguely know, but nobody actually talks too much about. And they always think of Shopee as an e-commerce platform. But over the last few years, it has built a fairly large, I would say fairly sophisticated digital financial services, which is powered by lending. And Philip, can you scroll up a little bit? Yeah. So basically, if you look at the loan book, do you know what loan book is?
It's a record of how much money they are loaning
It's
to the
outstanding,
consumers.
right? So obviously, when companies report the size of their lending operations, I mean, some of them report, okay, this is my loan book. Some others report, okay, this is my dispersal. Like how much loan have I given out? Which one is bigger?
Your loan book.
Dispersal.
Why?
I mean, if you look at digital financing companies, their loans typically last for 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. So during the 3 months, the same amount of money that you can disperse multiple times and people will pay back. But actually what you mentioned probably makes sense because some of the sort of larger financing companies, they will give out their loan like less than one time a year. So the loan book might be bigger, yeah.
One thing interesting about SEAMoney, like we're looking at the slide now, right? So they have this thing called on-book as well as off-book loan. So what is actually the differences between both of these loans?
So basically it's money that's from its equity and its debt, right? So for instance, in C Group's point of view, they will have probably some money that they have on their equity, so they use as a lending capital. But there's also things like, okay, the deposit they have in the digital bank, they would have the corporate loan that they take from lenders that they can use as lending capital. So basically, this is the on-book lending. And off-book means that, okay, I provide lending and sometimes I don't want to provide this amount of capital. Sometimes somebody else wants to be part of it to share the risk. So say I work with a bank in Indonesia. So if I issue a loan of, say, $100 to a consumer in Indonesia, so I would provide, say, 20% of this $100, that $20, and $80 would come from the bank. The $80 loan book is on a book of loan of the bank, not on SEAMoney itself. So for SEAMoney, it will be off book.
So that's what considered off. But SEAMoney seems to have a bigger proportion of on-book loans, right? So for Q3, on-book loans were about 3.8 billion US billions, and then off-book is 0.8. So they are mostly financing most of these loans themselves.
Not necessarily, right? You could be the depositors. I mean, if you think about, different.
But it's on their equity.
It's on their book.
It's on their book.
It's the debt on their book.
Yeah.
So it's liability. If you think about historically, when tech companies first try to start lending operations, people will not believe them, right? So saying that, hey, if I lend money to you, or if you use my money to do lending, how can I be sure that you can take the money back and return the profits to me? So usually they start with the lending from the equity. But equity is very expensive to raise equity. So over the years, they go to the loan approach. So, hey, I'm a company. I borrow like $50 million to use as lending capital. I guarantee that I'll pay back this. And the company will guarantee that. And whether the lenders pay me back doesn't affect
I still have to pay
the ultimate lender. But that can be expensive. So eventually, what they probably grew, they didn't provide a breakdown, but if we manage to find the books of the digital banks they own, we will probably find some clues, which is, I don't know, do you use any digital bank?
No.
Okay. Phyllis, no? Joshua, no?
Fintech like
Revolut, okay.
Is Revolut considered a digital bank?
In certain countries, I think they have a banking license in certain countries, right?
I use Revolut.
Okay. When you put money there, do you put money there?
Oh yes, I do.
Do they pay you interest?
No,
Okay, cool. Very good.
I
Very
don't. I don't think they do.
Good. And when Cbank first launched in Indonesia, they were paying depositors 7% interest per annum.
Damn. If they did that in Singapore, then yeah, I would use it.
I thought they would do it in Singapore. because the case in Indonesia is that if they want to borrow money to use as lending capital, as a company, they probably need to pay like 12 to 14% interest.
Oh.
And if they pay the lenders 7%, which is already much higher compared to like the consumers will get in other banks. I think Mandiri pays like 1.5%. So of course it's very attractive to lenders because they get higher return. And it's attractive for C Group as well because they get all this capital at very low cost. Speaking of which, I think 7% is still quite high. If they use like 4%,
They'll still get
be very
be able
attractive.
to get a good amount.
Yeah.
Another thing when we were looking at the financial services results, right, it's not just the loan book, but also the non-performing loans. So their non-performing loans seems to be about 1.2%, which I think is quite low. It has been going down.
It is quite low.
So we used to run a digital lending company in Indonesia,
yeah,
right?
I used to be a loan shark, yes.
Maybe you can explain to the viewers, how do you grow your loan books while still trying to minimize this risk of non-performing loans?
I think the issue with the consumer credit is that, all of you guys have credit card, right?
Yes.
This is because you are good customers. You have a stable income and the people know where you live and you probably have some, history, like your parents own a house or something. So you are the good customers and you will be covered by credit. In the market, there are also people who need credit but could not get anything from the banks or formal financial institutions. So where do they go? Loan sharks. And why do loan sharks charge high interest?
Because those people have no other choice.
No.
I was like, who else can they get money from if not the loan shark?
No, they charge high interest because the risk of that is very high, right? Because people who borrow money from loan sharks, they don't have good credit history. They have a higher chance of not paying back. And to compensate for the risk,
they charge a higher interest.
They charge higher interest. And of course, all this like the collection, whatever tactics are also part of that business. Of course, that business is not legal, I think.
In Singapore, I think it's illegal.
Yeah.
It's illegal, right?
It's illegal, but it shows some reality of people wanting to get credit and that they don't have formal means to access credit. Now you project this to a more developing country like Indonesia. I remember for a long time, the credit card penetration of Indonesia is about 3%.
It's very low.
Like 3% of the people have credit cards. So which means the vast majority of people, when they do consumption, when they buy things, to access credit, either they don't have any means or they have to find like very expensive credit means. Why is the credit card penetration so low? Is because, in Singapore, everything's regulated, right? People know where you live and, your whole sort of journey is...
SingPass.
Yes.
All in one-stop shop.
Yeah, and you have your credit history, you have your bank account, you have all this, and you have your education.
We have a very large banked population as well. Most of the population has a bank since they were young.
Yes, and you have the history of dealing with the bank, and so that can help sort of banks assess your credit worthiness.
Yes.
And you also have the credit bureau report. But in a country like Indonesia, for example, so most people will not have access to this. And from banks and lenders' point of view, I know that you could potentially be a good borrower, but I don't know. If I don't know, what do? I raise the interest rate to compensate for the potential risk. That is why, credit card penetration in Indonesia has been low because the banks do not know who these customers are.
But bringing this back to Shopee, so how does Shopee as an e-commerce platform assess the risk of its customers? So we're assuming most of these Shopee customers who are using the loans from Shopee are their consumers, right? So how does Shopee as a platform manage this risk or judge their consumers? So
do you remember when you were applying for credit card, what kind of information do you have to give the bank?
My payslip, yeah.
Okay, what else?
They will ask like your property, who owns this property. I think that's about it.
You need to fill in who your employer is, which for us
is
is reputable.
payslip. Yeah. It's payslip.
Yeah. And they'll probably access your credit bureau data.
Yeah.
Which in Singapore is very established. Indonesia, the problem with the banks is that they don't have access to all these established means for the consumers. Many people work in informal sectors, so they will not have payslip. Many people are rich, but they don't have payslip. So unless historically you see certain credit card practices is that, okay, in order to get say 5,000 credit in your credit card, you have to put $5,000 deposit into the bank to serve as a contra. So for Shopee's case, and obviously for them to look at, okay, whether you're a good customer or not, they have some initial data to play with. Like, okay, where do you live? Well, no, where do you like to live? Because we
where do you send your parcels to?
Where you send your parcels to, and what stuff you buy. How often do you buy it? There are lots of data points that they know about you, and if you use sort of Shopee Pay and basically everything is closed loop, right? And they know, how you pay, what kind of payment method you put on top of that, how do you top up. So they will have a lot of data to allow them to form initial judgment about, okay, whether you are likely a good customer or likely a bad customer. So based on that profile, they assign you a credit limit. Maybe you start with $100, right? Because I don't know where.
But then it grows as they.
Yeah. So if you prove to be a good customer, every time you pay back on time, etc., and your credit limit will grow. And if you default and stuff, maybe you will be denied credit next time. So when they do that repeatedly, customers who are judged to be good get more credit. Customers who are judged to be bad get less credit. And overall, you will see the quality of the credit portfolio will grow.
That's quite interesting, especially if you look at countries that have a large unbanked population, because there's not enough, like you said, right, data information. But then these e-commerce companies, because the consumers are already using their other services, it's a good opportunity then for them to just use the data that they have to kind of build up this whole lending system as well, right? And another interesting thing about SEAMoney is that they also have this Shopee Paylater, which is essentially like a buy now, pay later. Buy now, pay later. So Phyllis, can you go to the tab where we were looking at? So this is, I'm not sure if this is in the rest of our Southeast Asia that we know of, but at least in Singapore, this is something that is interesting. So I just tested it out this morning.
Okay, you're buying something for $560.
No, this is something you have to opt into. Okay. So it's not as long as you want to, you can. You have to opt into it. And they will
opt into buy now, pay later.
Yeah, to use Shopee Paylater.
So if you think about that, essentially it's the same as applying for a credit card.
Yeah, they need to approve you based on their credit.
So how much time do it take for them to approve?
I haven't checked. I tried this morning.
Okay.
But
it should be pretty fast.
It should be quite fast.
Banks usually take days.
Yeah, they didn't ask a lot of questions. But in Singapore, what we see in terms of the Shopee Paylater is that they have...
they gave you like $1,500 credit, so which means that you were approved.
No, this is a sample.
Okay.
This is not my screenshot because I wasn't approved. I haven't been approved. So they allow you to pay installments in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. But what's interesting, I've realized, is that for 1 month and 3 months, they don't charge you an interest, but for 6 and 12 months, they charge you a higher interest. So why do you think they have a fee only for like the 6 and 12 months, but not 1 or 3?
Because the risk for them is higher and also the cost for them is higher as well, right? Because essentially, they provide you credit. And if you pay everything back within 3 installments, within 3 months, and your effective duration or length of this loan would be 1.5 months, because you pay back something at the very beginning. But if it's 12 months, and of course this becomes 6 months, so essentially they'll lend you the money for 6 months. So the cost for them is higher, and the risk for them is probably higher as well.
So that's why they probably charge an interest as well.
Yes, banks don't charge. Banks don't charge you for credit card, right? Installment programs.
No.
0% installment.
Yeah, most of them are 0%. So even the Apple Store doesn't charge you.
You know how the installment with the bank works, right? So the banks would sort of enable this credit installment program with a particular merchant, and when the consumer uses that, the banks pays the whole thing minus the processing fee to the merchant.
That's similar to how...
And then consumer will pay the bank back.
That's essentially similar to how buy now, pay later works as well, right?
It is. Yeah. Although with the banks, you usually deal with the very large ticket items. Banks will not finance you for something like $50 over like 12 months.
If you guys are curious, we did do an episode earlier this year. I think it was in March or April. So it's episode 69 called The Business Model Behind Buy Now, Pay Later, where we go pretty in-depth into how merchants or how these buy now, pay laters companies are actually earning a profit from the transactions that they are managing and why some people use buy now, pay later.
Was that a video episode?
No, it's an audio episode. So you can listen to it on Spotify. Yes. So earlier we were talking about how C's loan book is growing. And of course, a part of this is probably also because of the introduction of Shopee Paylater, right?
I think a part of that is Shopee Paylater expanding to large ticket items, right? I mean, if you look at the screenshot that you're putting here, you can pay things which are worth $700+ with Shopee Paylater. So I think historically, I think they only deal with very, very small ticket items because to build the credit, they need to test something with a low risk way and with quick credit cycles like 1 month, 3 months. But if they offer something for 12 months, which means that, cost aside, they probably have higher confidence about, your credit worthiness, so they're willing to offer you this.
And this is probably good for Shopee as an e-commerce platform in general. So for example, if people are making higher ticket purchases on your platform, essentially your GMV also increases, right? And then of course that helps with the merchants as well, because if I'm a brand or if I have an expensive product, I know that you offer this service to your consumers. It's easier for me to list on your platform as well, knowing that it probably reduces that barrier for consumers to want to buy my product.
I think, the whole thing about offering credit is that is to increase conversion, right? So people go to a store, they look at this thing, they like it. They think about, okay, can I afford it or do I want to spend that money? And if you spread that money over like 6 months, 12 months, of course, the barrier is much lower. People much more like to buy, unless it's you.
Yes, because I do the calculation by myself when I buy something. Like if I use it for a year, then this is how much it costs a month, but I have to make the payment upfront.
We discussed with the Phyllis before this podcast, and she actually agreed as well. So basically, she would take the credit and pay it back immediately.
Yes.
And only keep the points.
Yeah. So
and miles.
If you make the purchase, it's like, for example, let's say I want to buy something that costs $1,000.
Yes.
But I know it's something I'll use over a year.
Yeah.
I will pay the $1,000 upfront.
Yeah.
But to me, the cost of buying that item is $1,000 divided by 12 months. It's essentially the same as installment. It's girl math. We don't need to explain that.
Yeah, that's the reason why Joshua, who is also behind camera, who is, by the way, from Germany, struggled for a long time to understand logic. And he still doesn't understand, right?
You don't need to understand. There's no logic. The logic is that there's no logic. It's just like this.
Yeah.
So I think moving on from C Group, another company who also recently released their financials earnings this week was actually Grab. And Grab also has a lending service. So can you go to their financial report? So their loan portfolio is about 10% of Shopee?
498 out of compared to 4.6 billion. That's about like 10. 12, 13%?
Yeah.
About that. So it's much smaller compared to Shopee.
Yes. And in the commentary that we wrote, so we have a commentary, it'll be linked down in the show notes below about C's and Grab's Q3 results. You said that there's a lot of potential for Grab to tap into here. So what do you mean by potential for Grab?
I think in the region, there are not that many players which have a huge user base that they can sort of tap into to offer digital financial services and credit services. And if you look at Grab's loan portfolio, it's obviously much smaller compared to Shopee. I think there are some historical reasons to that. If you look at the users of Grab, I think overall they are more premium compared to users of Shopee. And Shopee offers lots of daily necessity at a very cheap cost. I mean, for people who use taxis and ride every day on a regular basis, they are of a certain sort of income class, at least.
Could it also be because generally the transaction value on Grab would not be as high as that of Shopee? Because if I'm buying something, like if I buy a big ticket item, obviously the GMV would be a lot higher. But if I were to take like Shopee Paylater, the amount would be much bigger than if I were to take like a cab ride.
In certain countries, probably that's the case because for instance, Indonesia, I mean, a Grab ride will probably cost you like $2-3 US.
Yes.
And an average Shopee parcel will cost you at least $6 to $7. So that's like 3 times difference. In Singapore, I would argue it's probably not the case because how much does it take?
That's true.
Like
But like, if
$10?
no one would be taking
There are parcels which are like $10.
but you wouldn't be taking a loan to take a Grab ride, right? It wouldn't make sense. Like, I wouldn't split up my Grab ride payment over 3 months. It wouldn't make sense as a consumer.
It's it's a bit difficult to reconcile, right?
Yeah.
It's, because you usually don't have that much mental barrier to actually buy things on Grab.
So I would think most of Grab's loan books in terms of their like maybe lending services or anything would be maybe physical stores instead.
No, most loan products is actually targeting towards the other side of the equation, which is other riders, drivers, and merchants, which I think makes sense because these are the people who actually make money from Grab, and Grab know their data the best, right? I mean, you probably take like, I don't know, 1-2 rides a day. Many of these people, they take, 20 transactions with Grab on a daily basis because they're providing a service. And Grab will take, a lot of cases, take their money first and disperse to them. So when that is the case, you would have more leverage over these people. And of course, I think Grab also announced very, very low sort of NPL ratio. I can't remember the exact number, but it's also very low. So it's because they have leverage over these people. They can make money out of Grab. I remember like many years ago when I was talking to people from Ant who were providing sort of merchant lending on Taobao and Tmall, they said the NPL is very low. Not because we're doing a fantastic job, it's because many of the sellers, 70 to 80% of their income depend on Taobao. So even if they want to default on loans, they will default on loans or somebody else. Not for us.
That's true. So I guess that would kind of be the difference between Grab's and Shopee's financial services, right? So Shopee's is more towards the consumer side, whereas Grab focuses more on the riders and drivers. But do you think Grab has the opportunity to leverage more on its consumers? So you said that there's potential for Grab, right? Is this potential for growth on the riders, merchant side or on the consumer side?
I think on the consumer side, there is room for growth because I think Grab's current like monthly transacting user volume is
41 million.
41 something million.
Yeah, 41
million. I
million.
would presume the majority of them are consumers. And amongst these consumers, and that there's a certain percentage who would probably need buy now pay later services. And there's a smaller percentage who would need sort of lending services to cover their needs. I mean, education, healthcare, whatever. So I think these people do exist and they are already on a platform. The question is that, how do you identify them? How do you collect enough data from them for you to form an initial credit assessment? And how do you evolve your credit assessment? Because for any lending service to, you get out to the people you don't know, unless you have super strong collection.
Like the loan sharks.
Yeah, I don't think loan sharks are that good, right? Because if they're that effective, they will not use the tactics of sending pig's head to people.
True. But that's their tactics.
Yes, that shows that the usual tactics don't work. So they have to resort into this kind of intimidation. But anyway, so for Grab's case, I do think that if they start a large lending operation, cash loan operation to the consumers, they will probably have a high initial NPL rate.
But my question would be in what services that they provide as a platform should they be providing these lending services to the consumers?
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So if it's on platform, you will start with something better because you have better data, more leverage. But still, you will not know how good the consumer quality is. And if you start with something off platform, you run at a higher risk. So the question is that what's your starting point? If your starting point is, 20% NPL, 30% NPL, and how do you quickly bring that down to 1%? Through sort of iterating your credit model, through better data collection or whatever. So how much time do you give yourself? So I do think that they're making progress from their loans to merchants and drivers, and then consumers would be something. They have some buy now pay later service.
They do,
but it's still at the sort of risk-free side, right? Less risky
side.
Yeah.
It's not as. Also, I think it's not as apparent as Shopee, but also then could be because generally, they have different business models as a platform, right?
I do think that there's potential, but knowing Grab as an organization, they've been quite rational in terms of their execution, especially since the pandemic. So they don't rush into too many things. There are things which they think they should do, but not now. So that shows, in a way, some kind of strategic restraint. In another way, it also shows that it has a pretty secure position in terms of ride-hailing, at least, and to a certain extent for delivery in Southeast Asia. Yeah. Nobody can challenge them big time. Look at Shopee.
Yeah.
Over the past few years,
That's true.
you had challenges from like TikTok Shop.
But then again, it's also because of the nature of their business. Grab itself is such an operationally heavy business, right? For a competitor to come in
to build something
and build
from scratch
at that scale and volume, it's very difficult as well.
So maybe somebody should buy Foodpanda.
So thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Impulso podcast. We hope that you guys enjoyed this week's episode. And if you did, do like and subscribe to our videos, as well as share it with your friends if you think they would find it useful as well. Thank you and bye-bye.